Scripture readings, Luke 15, verses 1 through 7. All the tax collectors and sinners were approaching to listen to him, and the Pharisees and scribes were complaining, "This man welcomes sinners and eats with them." So he told them this parable. "What man among you who has 100 sheep and loses one of them does not leave the 99 in the open field and go after the lost one until he finds it? When he has found it, he joyfully puts it on his shoulders, and coming home he calls his friends and neighbors together, saying to them, 'Rejoice with me because I have found my lost sheep.' I tell you, in the same way, there will be more joy in heaven over one sinner who repents than 99 righteous people who don't need repentance."
If I'd have known my brother was reading, I would have had him read the whole chapter. But Luke 15 is where we're going to be starting. That's my physical brother, if you're wondering. I know you're all my brothers and sisters. Luke 15 is such an amazing chapter for obviously a number of reasons. But for us, this past couple of weeks, of those that have obeyed the gospel, those that have turned their lives back to the Lord, we've been able to see Luke 15 in action. And so this morning, I just want to talk a little bit about what it looks like as this sheep, as the one that is lost. The truth is, we need to understand, as Luke 15 teaches us, there is something that is lost. There are people that are lost. The danger is that they don't know they're lost in many cases. They don't realize they're lost, as we're going to see as we go forward in this. But the awesome thing is that our God understands that they are lost. The beginning of Luke, the 15th chapter, beginning in verse 1, says, "Now all the tax collectors and sinners were coming near him to listen to him. Both the Pharisees and the scribes began to grumble, saying, 'This man receives sinners and eats with them.'" The word receives here is the word welcomes. Jesus was welcoming the sinners to eat with him. And praise be to God that he does, that he receives sinners. Understanding that you and I are all sinners. Not because, and this is important, you are born in sin, because you were not born in sin. But because you've chosen to sin. You chose sin. I chose sin. And we understand here in context that he's talking about tax collectors, how horrible, its own group that are mentioned in verse 1. In the first century, how they were viewed. And sinners. And how easy it is sometimes for us to look and see sinners around us, but not realize that the sinner that I need to focus on is the one I see in the mirror. And how dangerous it is not to realize that I'm a sinner, or that you're a sinner. And not to understand that Jesus Christ is waiting to welcome you in, to receive you, wants nothing more than to have a relationship with you. One of the most amazing things that we find in scriptures, especially when you're talking about the sheep, is just simply how helpless they were. You can keep your finger here, but over in Romans, the 5th chapter, Paul will use this same word to describe us. In verse 6, he says, "For while we were still helpless, at the right time Christ died for the ungodly. For one will hardly die for a righteous man, though perhaps for the good man someone would dare even to die. But God demonstrates his own love towards us, in that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. Much more than having now been justified by his blood, we shall be saved from the wrath of God through him. For if while we were enemies, we were reconciled to God through the death of his Son, much more having been reconciled, we shall be saved by his life." There's some amazing words that are used to describe us. You're helpless, which we don't like to say. I'm helpless. Then he says you're sinners. And then in verse 10 he calls us enemies. Who strives or looks at themselves as enemies of God? But based on our choices, that's exactly what we can be. I was an enemy of God. The truth is, as I stand before you, I was a sinner. The truth is, if it wasn't for the grace of my God, I would still be an enemy. I would still be helpless. And I would have no hope. The truth is, every single one of us that understand truly what sin is and have chosen to go against God sit as enemies of God, as helpless. There's nothing that you can do without Jesus. In the last few weeks, what we have seen, as Luke, the 15th chapter, will talk about, are people that came to their senses, in essence. Realized the position that they were in. Those of us that have obeyed the gospel realize the position that we are in as helpless individuals. In Luke, the 15th chapter, it goes on and talks about the prodigal son, the parable we're probably most familiar with in this chapter. And the understanding of the father looking out for his son. He allows him to go. The son goes out and he wastes his whole inheritance. He's sitting and eating in the pig slop, helping the pigs. From a Jewish perspective, you can imagine how difficult that was. And he came to his senses, we are told. And he understood that he needed to go back home. But he wasn't going to go back home as a son. He was going to go back as a slave, a servant. I'm not worthy to be your son. He understood where he stood before the Father in this situation, what he had done. And the reality for you and for me is that we need to understand that as well. One of the things that I think have been so powerful over the last couple of weeks, and with every situation, are the amazing stories that come from us obeying God. One of the things I think is so important for us to understand is that we all have a story of salvation. I was 11 years old when I obeyed the gospel. I was sitting at Mill Road on a Wednesday night, and somebody was up, and I have no idea who it was up talking about hell and how I was going to go and end up in hell if I did not change my way. If I didn't have my life, give my life over to God. And he talked about what it needed to do, and because of the love of God and how we were sinners. Even at 11 years old, I can still remember at my old age now that I knew full well I was not going to leave that building. Because the only way I was going to go from being something that was lost is to realize that there was something that was looking for me. And in this case, someone was looking for me. And it doesn't mean since the age of 11 I've never stumbled. The awesome thing about our God is that he's given us that as well, an answer for that as well. The grace and mercy of our God that he has shown, and that's what we see in this story in Luke the 15th chapter. When you talk about the sheep, one of the things I think is so interesting that is said is the understanding of value. The human logic in Luke the 15th chapter, the first 7 verses, the human American logic in 2024, is you have 99 sheep. That's pretty good out of 100. Actually, that's excellent out of 100. But the amazing thing about what is said here in verse 4 says, "What man among you, if he has 100 sheep and has lost one of them, does not leave the 99 in the open pasture and go after the one which is lost until he finds it?" Which one of you would not do that? He's going to look until he finds it, it says. In verse 8, the lady that is looking for the coin, it says, until she finds it. In verse 20, the one I think we do understand, is that one of the children is gone and comes back, and the father sees him and runs out and embraces him. You understand the value of just one. The song we just sang makes this point. Just one soul. And maybe we're the ones that are looking as the 99. What's the big deal about the one? The problem is we don't see ourselves as the one. You are so valuable to God that he sent his son to die for you, to give you the opportunity. Though you're helpless, though you're a sinner, though you're an enemy of his, Though others may view you in verse 2 to just simply be sinners, and why would you ever eat with them? Why would you welcome them? That Jesus Christ said, I died for you. I will search for you until I find you. You get to choose. It's your choice to return. But understanding how God views you is so important. Our God showed mercy to kings that we read in the scriptures and people that had leprosy. Our God showed mercy to every single person that he ran into while he was on earth, Jesus, and every single one of us that has ever been born. That he sent his son to die for you. And again, I try to make this point all the time, just to simply give us the opportunity. He loves you far more than you will ever understand, than I will ever understand. He wants you to be with him for eternity more than you want to be with him for eternity. He is love. He is grace. He is mercy. He is the one who did everything for us before the foundation of the world. Not so there was going to be a group that's already ready to go, that some will misuse the term elect to make, but that we get our choice to be a part of his people, to be a part of this elect, to be a part of his family. For you and I to understand what it simply means, as he says in verse 4, that he was going to look until he finds that sheep, until they find that coin. Now, you talk about something we struggle with today. If you lost your credit card, or your direct deposit account numbers, or your passwords, maybe then you understand. We have to understand when somebody has 10 coins and loses one, that's a lot at this time. It is today, too. 10%. And it says that she rejoiced when she found it. Do you understand that value? We need to understand how valuable we are in God's eyes. And it is not to make us arrogant, but to humble us, to understand that he is receiving you. He wants you. He desires a relationship for you. That somebody is looking for you even when you are choosing horrible things. He still is looking for you. And the amazing thing about our God is not simply that he looks for you and says, wow, there's my sheep. That he has the power to save you. Over in Acts, the 4th chapter, Acts chapter 4, in verse 12, it says, there is salvation in no one else, for there is no other name under heaven that has been given among men by which we must be saved. There is no one else that can save us from the things that we have done. If you are a sinner, there is not enough good works that you can do to save your soul. It is only by the grace of our God. I love Ephesians, the 2nd chapter. We've been talking about it a lot the last few weeks. And one of the main reasons I love it in Ephesians, the 2nd chapter, what he calls grace. It is the gift of God. It is his gift. It is not something you earn. He sent his son to die for you. He has given us grace. You and I have to choose to accept it, to obey it. But it has already been done. It's like this amazing gift that you may get this month, and saying thank you for the amazing gift and never opening it. Never opening it. That's probably the best gift I've ever gotten. You don't have no idea, and you don't open it. God has given us this gift that I'm afraid sometimes we don't realize how powerful it is. God's logic when it comes to you and to me is that one soul is worth saving. And it's your soul. There are people here this morning that need to have their souls saved. Jesus Christ is looking for you. He has the power to save you. He is willing and able to forgive all that you have done. The question is whether or not we're willing to accept that. Whether we view ourselves to be too... I've been in situations where you talk to people. I've done too much. He's never going to forgive me. Oh, my God will. My God can. I haven't done anything as bad as other people have. You need to understand that there's that one sin. That sin that put him on that cross. That sin that you may view or we may view to be a small thing, Jesus died for. That sin is what separates us from God. And it's his grace and his mercy that gives us that opportunity. And for us to understand that when this occurs and one chooses to come back, to be found, I don't think we can fully understand this great joy that happens. This is the part I've been thinking about a lot the last couple of weeks. The idea of salvation and the rejoicing that occurs. There's a few things that tells me. I need to understand how horrible the consequences are of sin. I need to understand that I may view sin on some sort of a scale that it's just little bitty lies compared to murder. But God doesn't view it that way. God views it as sin separates me from him because he is holy. And when somebody decides that they are going to live for God, the rejoicing that occurs and the rejoicing we're told about here is beyond comprehension because of how horrible the consequences are. The other piece is how awesome your soul is to God. How valuable it is to him. In Luke's account, in the lost sheep's account in Luke 15, this is the phrase that is used to describe in verse 7. I tell you that in the same way there will be more joy in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous persons who need no repentance. That one soul causes there to be more joy in heaven, it says. You know the awesome thing about that for me on September 14th, a long time ago? That rejoicing was for my soul. Whenever you obeyed the gospel, that rejoicing was for your soul. Our God rejoiced because you chose a relationship with him. With the coin, it says there's joy in the presence of the angels of God. Things that we don't even understand or get our heads wrapped around. The angels of God over one soul. Your soul. And then the prodigal son. In verse 32. He says, but we had to celebrate and rejoice, for this brother of yours was dead and has begun to live, and was lost and has been found. You understand the great celebration that occurs in the house in the story of the prodigal son. He was dead, and he's come back. The brother is upset, but the father isn't. The father, obviously, talking of God, understands what has just occurred. They rejoice in the house of God. What about us? So often we can be like the brother. If somebody comes forward at the end of services, and our reaction is, oh boy, it's almost already 12. You don't understand the value of a soul. You just don't understand the value of a soul. You certainly don't understand the value of your soul, nor of the person that's asking for help or needs to obey the gospel. And I'm going to tell you, I see this all the time. I get to stand up in the front, and you can see people. That's an issue. And I'm not talking about another place. I'm talking about here. Somebody comes forward. We've got to get out. Let's go. Let's get out of here. We have plans. You don't have anything more important than watching somebody save their soul. Nobody does. It causes the heavens to celebrate. And you're too busy? There is great joy in the finding of what was lost. And that which is lost is you and me. But by the grace of our God, He was willing to come and to look for us. And to look until He found us. Why hasn't the Lord returned? We're told because He's patient, long-suffering. Why? Because He wants your soul. He wants you and me. He wants a relationship with all. We have got to understand that value. And the celebration that occurs in heaven when one obeys the gospel needs to be the exact celebration that occurs here. And I believe it is. But I mean from all of us. I've been in situations where we sing Happy Day, oh happy day, and it sounds like you're at a funeral. That is the saddest happy day I've ever heard. Not here. When Alan led it the other day, I thought, oh boy. But it was good. Because we actually sang for what it is. It's a happy day. It's a celebration that we join our God in celebrating. The finding of a soul. The song that we are just about to sing, as the invitation song, has these words. Jesus, the loving shepherd, gave His dear life for thee. Tenderly now He's calling. Wonder, come to me. Haste, for without is danger. Come, cries the shepherd blessed. Enter the fold of safety. Enter the place of rest. I love pictures like this. Not solely because you see a guy running that's supposed to be Jesus. But I know who that sheep is. I know who that lamb is. That's you and that's me. And my God is chasing after us. And He wants nothing more than for you to have a relationship with Him. He has done everything for you. Everything. Including giving us free will. That you get to choose whether or not you're going to have a relationship with Him. That's your choice. That's your choice. But you are so valuable that He sent His Son to give you the opportunity right now to get your life right with Him. His Son suffered and died for you. And He knows your name. He knows who you are. He knows what you've done, what I've done. And He still desires a relationship with us. That is an awesome God. If you need to obey the gospel, do not wait. Please understand that you are helpless. But God isn't. You are a sinner. But God is merciful. We're His enemy, but He loves you more than you'll ever understand. It's your choice. If you need to obey the gospel, now's the time. If you have questions, ask them. Please, let us help you. Make sure you're praying for one another. Make sure you're encouraging one another, helping one another. But if there's anything we can do for you,